Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad that y'all are here. I have a new story for y'all today. It's a little bit twisted, but I think that y'all will like it a lot. My name is Brandy, by the way, and what I do is I tell dark history while I put some makeup on my face. And I don't really tell you what I'm doing to my face, but I will list below what I use. But I'll just be telling the story while I'm putting my makeup on, pretty much. And yeah, that's what we do here. So if that sounds awesome to you, definitely hit that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. And I'll go ahead and tell you guys, just imagine yourself a young girl that does have some sort of societal role, and she gets chosen to go to a very special school. Very special. The school is ran by the Countess of where they live. And this is back in the early 1500s. No, the late 1500s, early 1600s, excuse me. But just imagine getting that opportunity to go learn from a countess. And so you go to her castle, but then nobody ever sees you again. So what happened? Let's go ahead and get this party started and find out. Me a new palette and I can't wait to try it. Anyways, I hope y'all are having a glorious weekend, or had a glorious weekend. It's been snowing here, so yeah, this was not a lot of snow, not enough to make a difference, unfortunately, because I live way too far south. But anyway, so I'm sure you guys want to know, who is this countess? Her name was Elizabeth Bathory, okay? And she was born in 1560, and she was born into a lot of privilege. Like, to say that her cousin was the Prince of Transylvania, okay? So just kind of keep that in mind. She also had an uncle that was very high up. And so from an early age, she knew that she was going to have to marry, and that she was gonna have to end up, you know, doing what all the royals did. She was a royal. And so at 11 years old, which is incredibly young to me, she's engaged. Yeah. But they don't get married until she's like 14 or 15 years old. This is Elizabeth. Now, before she gets married, she has an illegitimate child. They do not know who the father is. It's not the guy that she's proposed to or that she's engaged to. And they end up giving the child to somebody in the town and paid them to take care of it, basically. So we don't know how that happened. We don't know if it was like a servant and somebody hurt her and like harmed her on purpose, you know, like SA'd her, or not. We have no idea. So she has this child, but she ends up going and getting married to a guy that's a count. Yes. Count Fernine Nadisi. I really need to work on this. But anyway, she ends up marrying him. That's the guy she had been with, you know, engaged to for a while. So they finally get married when she's 15. And he gives her, because he's so rich, at this point, she inherits a lot of stuff. They're rich as crap. He gifts her a castle on their wedding day. Castle Catrice is the name of it, okay? And this place was huge. Not only did she gain that, she gained like 17 villages of land that her husband had acquired, because he was a count, and now she was a countess, okay? But her husband, and she did love her husband. I feel like she loved her husband. And you guys will figure, y'all will probably see this too. But her husband was away a lot because he was fighting during the Ottoman empires when all this fighting was going on. And I mean, it was just absolutely bonkers. So she's married May 8th, 1575. She gets a beautiful castle from her husband. And everything is great and dandy. You know, they're rich. She's going back and forth between things because she has to take care of stuff while her husband's gone and fighting. So she's the one that's taking care of all these little towns and the land and all this other stuff that she has. Now, when these two got married, this combined their lands, okay, in both Transylvania and Hungary. All right, so they had a lot of land, a lot, between the two of them, between Elizabeth and her husband, the Count. And so people, you know, they weren't really, I wouldn't say they were jealous or anything like that. I mean, they lived pretty normally for a while. She had 5 children, only 3 survived. I'm not really sure what happened to the other 2. They died young in infancy, unfortunately. So, but she did have 2 daughters and 1 son from that marriage. And they actually didn't have a kid until almost 10 years later after they got married, okay? So, old dude is off fighting in the Ottoman Wars, and she's at home and she's taking care of the businesses. She's taking care of the villages. She's looking over the land. She's making sure that everything stays up to par for her husband for when he gets back home. So in 1578, her husband, the Count, got promoted in the military, and he became the chief commander of the Hungarian troops. And she was very proud of that, but it wasn't too long that he started to have leg pains, like really, really bad leg pains. He couldn't, it got so bad that it disabled him, okay? And you can imagine as a wife watching your husband deteriorate right in front of your eyes, and there's nothing that you can do about it, right? Well, so he ends up passing, unfortunately. And he was only, let's see, if he was 48 years old. He died January 4th, okay? And it's just so sad because they never found out what was wrong with him. And it wasn't until after he passed that our Countess started doing some very strange things, okay? I think they had been married at that point when he died for 29 years. That's a long time, especially for back then, and for a man that fought in the war and all that other kind of stuff, you know? And so anyway, he ends up passing, and then people start coming up missing. It is not long before people are coming up missing, but nobody can say anything because this is the Countess we're talking about. When her husband died, okay, she inherited the huge the huge castle that she was in, along with the 17 little villages and all the land that she already had. And then she gets her husband's land as well. What does this do, y'all? We've seen it in all the videos. A woman with a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of knowledge. She was not uneducated. She was very educated. She was very beautiful. She was very sophisticated. But she did have a mean streak in her. And that mean streak would come out so hard. So, between the years of 1602 and 1604, rumors started spreading. At first, it was just the servant girls, okay? First, it was just servants. And let me just point out that her husband was military. He knew how to torture people, obviously, because that's what they did back then. And so, collectively, some people think that maybe he taught her how to torture people, and then she kind of started to enjoy it a little bit too much because they would hurt their own servants and things like that. And people would hear about this, but of course, it's the Count and the Countess. What is anybody going to do about that? They're not going to do anything. You know, if you're just a servant that's serving them, unfortunately, you could abuse back then your servants. You could do whatever you wanted to them and not get in trouble. But it's when she started picking up the royal girls and bringing them to her school and teaching them things and telling them things and then doing things to them. Yes. But of course, these are rumors. They're very powerful, though. Nobody cared at first, like I say, because they were just servant girls. But people saw coffins leaving her castle many times. And she'll also be caught red-handed. the noble girls started to go missing, right? First, people did not care about servant girls going missing, but once they found out that these royals that were supposed to be attending this school were not coming home, they were being sent there to be taught how to be ladies, to be like the Countess. You know, everybody thought she was great and awesome. But behind closed doors, she was very mean, okay? She abused these girls. She would do numerous things to these girls to torture them, okay? And I know y'all are probably thinking, how does this match up with witches? Well, this feels all witchy to me, okay? And I'll tell you why in just a bit. We're getting there. We're getting there. These are the things that people said that Elizabeth did to these girls that came to her house, okay? She would stick nails or like pins in their fingers. She would burn them. She would put them like in the middle. Just think of like in the middle of winter being put in an ice bath. Now I know some people do that as for their body, you know, but when you're not expecting it and you're not wanting it and you're just having that done to you just because, it's a little bit messed up. She would pour honey on them and leave them to the elements. That's what some people would say. Like I said, the naked ice baths in the middle of winter. She would shove needles in their fingers. She mutilated their faces, like cut up their lips, their nose, their eyes, stuff like that. She would bite them on their shoulder and on their breast. You'll see where this is going here shortly, okay? And then she would burn their flesh, including, most of the time she would really mess up the lower region of these girls. Like, I don't know what that is, but that's what she would do. She was very abusive. This woman was incredibly abusive. Okay, so it wasn't until a noble woman was taken and wasn't shown, like she never went back home, that people really started talking, and they were like, what is going on at this castle? So here is where it gets messy, okay? So you have King Matthias of Hungary, and guess who he owes money to? The Countess, okay? And so he decides, because he's hearing all these rumors about the Countess supposedly, you know, killing people at her castle, killing young women when she's supposed to be mentoring them, he decides to put her cousin into action, which he was like the prime minister then, and his name was Georgie. I want to say it's Georgie Thurzos, but anyway, he sent him to investigate and allowed him to have like 2 notaries with him so that everybody can go around the town and get everybody's little witness statements and all this other kind of stuff. They wanted to build up as much against Elizabeth that they possibly could before they went to her house. By October of 1610, they had a whole bunch of records. They had a whole bunch of stuff they had to present, and they had, let's see, 52 witness statements. By 1610, they had over 300 witness statements saying that they saw coffins coming in and out of the castle, you know, and stuff like that. Just stuff that people could easily make up, right? And so this is kind of enough for old Gregory or Georgie or however you say his name. This is, you know, he's not very fond of this. And so he's like, you know what? I'm going to go surprise her at her house. I'm just going to show up. I'm just going to show up at her house and say, what's the haps? What's going on, cuz? What you doing today? You feel me? Like, and so he goes into the house. So he's like, knock, knock, knocking. Is anybody home? Over at Elizabeth's house. And he busts in. He busts in the middle of her. What he says, she was actually in the middle of torturing a woman or a young girl, and that there was another girl there that was just kind of walking around like in and out of a daze, almost as like she was like a prey girl. Not like this kind of prey, like prey as in she had been bitten on and things of that nature. And immediately her cousin's like, you're on house arrest, point blank period. And yeah, that's weird, right? You're probably thinking, why don't they arrest her? This is obviously some witchcraft stuff. You see what I mean? Yeah, obviously some witchcraft stuff. But nobody treats her that way, and I'll tell you why. Because if she was to go to jail and get convicted, all of that money she has and all of that land that she has goes to the state. And like I said, she owed the king, no, she didn't. He owed her a large sum of money. I don't know why he borrowed money, why a king would need to borrow money from the countess. I do not know. But I do know that they squashed that debt in order for her not to go to jail. The family was like, we don't want her to go to jail, and we'll squash the money part if she does not go to jail. But you're welcome to take her servants to jail, the ones that helped her and all this other stuff. So they take the servants to jail. They take all this evidence. 4 of her servants that supposedly helped Elizabeth with the bodies. There's 3 females and 1 male were arrested, tortured, and then questioned. Yeah, they were tortured, just like every other witch trial. We're talking about torture again. And so they basically said that, yeah, she was doing all these things at her house, and they shifted the blame to another servant that was actually, she was kind of known to be a witch in the area at that time, that she was actually helping Elizabeth. And so all of those people got put to death because one of them they had mercy on and cut off his head, the man's head, and burned his body. The other 3 females were burnt alive, okay, along with the little witchy helper person or whatnot. She was unnamed, but she was also assisting Elizabeth in some sort of magic with these girls, evidently. So all but one of them was put to death. Not Elizabeth, though. No, she's still holed up in her house. They have put her in a certain place in her castle in a tower and have told her she's got to stay there and she cannot come out. Some of those servants even tried to put off the blame on a chick that wasn't even alive anymore. I mean, but when you're being tortured because they were using hot irons to pull their fingers and stuff off, you'll say pretty much anything to get them to stop. Am I right or am I right? And so these poor servants, when they're tortured, they say things that most likely did not happen. Any kind of confession under torture like that should not even be allowed. But unfortunately, we're in the early 1600s, and witchcraft and witch trials were very, very prevalent right now. And so that's where the torture element comes in. That's why they ended up burning their bodies, to make a show of it, basically. So, but everybody's like wondering, like, what is to happen to Elizabeth? She never got convicted. She never went to court. All he needed was evidently all of these people's little witness statements, and then that was her being guilty. So because she was not accused of a crime, all of her stuff got divvied up between all of her family members that were all money hungry and power hungry. Most of them men, like her cousin and her cousin in Transylvania and all these people. They all wanted a piece of what she had because she gained so much when her husband died. So they lock her up in a tower and make everybody think she's this woman that bathes in the blood of young girls to keep her youth. Okay, they said they had 300 witness statements, and like 289 of them weren't even statements. They had nothing to do with the trial whatsoever. So they say they have all these statements. 250 were hearsay. And somebody said that they had saw how many victims that she had. And supposedly they said that the number was 650. Now, if somebody had seen that written down in a book, wouldn't that be at the trial, that book, or that person would give their testimony at the trial? But they didn't. So history says this woman killed 600 girls over the span of like 7 years. That, to me, for one thing, I don't think that's possible. Because I don't think people, would keep sending their kids to her if they knew that they weren't going to be coming back. And yeah, maybe at first it was just servants and girls, and that's why we didn't hear anything. But people would put in complaints if a chicken was harmed back then. So if nobody put in a complaint about the Countess, then nobody else really knew anything. But like I say, she was very powerful. A lot of people said that the servant's testimony was not reliable because it was taken under torture. Many of the witnesses were also on the side of the guy that was persecuting her, which was her own cousin. So he was calling people to the stand that was taking his side and saying that, yeah, she did all these things. Like, let me just tell you guys how many people she had against her. Like, it's awful. It's awful how many people she had against her. Her own son-in-law knew that they were coming to her house, and he didn't even bother to tell her. I mean, I'm just saying, I know they did catch her doing some stuff. And yes, she has a history, like I say, with hurting her servants and things of that matter. And she did open up a school for girls. But there's literally no proof, no literal proof that she killed 600 girls. There's no proof of that. This was a huge political thing. They say that she had, what do you call it, a printing press in her own house. And so she could print whatever she wanted to. She had a lot of power. That's what a lot of people don't understand. She had a lot of power, and most of the time, like we saw with Alice Kyteler, she owned an inn. She had some land. She was very vivacious. She brought attention from everywhere. And so you got to think this Countess is kind of like that too. She's beautiful. She has a lot of power. And now she's unwed. And people want what she has. And so what do? They make up a bunch of stuff about her. Now the question is, why? Why was she doing all this? Because they did catch her killing servants. That is not a crime during this time, okay? Now, she could have been doing, she could have had a complex after her husband passed. Maybe she was afraid that she was going to die, and so she was doing sacrifices in that manner, kind of like Sabbats, like Sabbats. And maybe that was, I think that her husband passing really screwed her up because she really wasn't that bad of a person until after he died. And I think that she was hung up on the fact of wanting to stay young so that she would not die. And so she may have abused some of these girls. But saying that she was like sucking their blood and like all this other stuff, I don't think so. I just don't. It just really reminds me of the old school movie Dracula, the one that has like Keanu Reeves in it. It's very mysterious, this woman. Okay, and so it's not too long after she's put in the tower, like I told you guys, and the tower. They say she's kind of free to roam the castle area because after her husband died, she stayed at the castle. Like, she just stayed there. She never went anywhere after that. Like, I'm telling you, I really think that she was hurt that her husband passed. Even though they'd been married for 29 years and they had 5 children together, 3 of whom lived, she was in love with him. Point blank period. You could tell that. And for him to pass the way he did, she probably was upset because she couldn't do anything to help him. So maybe she was trying to figure out a way to help him. We don't know. And maybe she even did that to him, but I don't think so. Because all this stuff started happening after he passed. And she might have been angry. She might have just been going through the stages of grief. And I'm not giving her an excuse on why you should beat on anybody. I don't care if they're just a servant or if, whoever. You shouldn't be doing that. But she could have been doing these things just to keep her power in check, to make sure she got to hold on to it. I think she knew that she was a victim when her husband died and that people were wanting her money. Her own family would do anything to get her money in her land. People thought that she went after the royals because they had more like royal blood and that would keep her young. And that she would bathe in this blood, which that came like 100 years after her death. She died like 4 years after being put in the tower. I think that she was just completely devastated when her husband died, and she lost control. They were beating their servants and things like that before, but she lost control. You know, because when you lose somebody, it's a really, really, really hard thing to get over. And especially when you're having 17 towns and a castle and you have to do all this stuff yourself, you know, it just gets complicated. So more than anything, I think that she was just very sad and depressed and then preyed upon because she inherited a lot of land and a lot of money when her husband died. And that put a target on her back because Matthias owed her a large sum of money and her family wanted that land. So what do? They trumped up some charges so that they could make sure she doesn't get convicted of being a witch, but they could also keep their eye on her and take her stuff at the same time. So, and it has been said later on by a lot of historians, they're starting to believe now that she didn't do any of these things. She did hurt some, but not 600 people. Surely if 600 people were dead within a 7-year span, somebody would notice that. They would notice that. You know, it wouldn't just be, oh, because they picked a royal. You know, like, these royals they can say and do anything. And it's just, back then, it was the word, you know. And so this whole story makes me sad because she lost her husband. She lost probably her kids, you know, and the only thing she was trying to do was be independent. And, you know, she had a printing press inside of her house. She had this huge castle. She had a lot of land, a lot of power, and a lot of people hated that just because she was a woman. To me, if she was not royal like she was, the Countess, she would have been put on trial. This would have been a witch trial, and she would have been put to death, point blank, period. But her family did not want that, because if she died, or if she got convicted, or if she died, then her stuff would go to Matthias, to the king, and then he would separate it all out, and the family did not want that. So she is not the Blood Countess or anything like that, no. She is just a woman that had a lot of power, and she wanted to help young girls because she did have a school. She did. And she could have been mean to those girls because she did have a mean streak. But she also wanted to help these girls by educating them on how to be more sophisticated, how to maybe get a better husband, you know, and things like that. So she actually did. There's evidence that she opened a school and that she was doing all these progressive things. She's very intelligent. And it just breaks my heart that these men, her own family, would look at her and see just her power and her money and think, how can we get that? You know, it's not ours, it's hers. She loved her husband. That's very obvious. So why did they decide to do it? It was all for political gain. Like I say, she had that printing press. She could say whatever she wanted to in the press. People didn't like that. No, they didn't like that. Especially men. Back then, to men, women should not have power. And even though she had a rough upbringing a little bit, you know, when she got pregnant. We don't know how that happened. That might be why she was so rough on the genital area with the bodies they did find, was because maybe she was SA'd earlier when she first had that first baby. And that could have been why it took them 10 years to have another one, because she was so afraid of that, because it had happened to her earlier before, but not in a loving way. You know, not between like a husband and a wife. So I think that after 10 years, she opened up to him. They really loved each other. They had 5 children, 2 of whom passed. And then when he got, you know, upgraded in the army and things like that, things went wrong with his body. And he ended up passing early, leaving her money, and then thus a target on her back. And so now they have tried to exonerate her name, thankfully, because this was definitely put on her for, like I say, she probably did kill some people, but not to the extent of 600 people. It's just not possible. And nobody would keep sending their kid there if they weren't coming back. I mean, that's just common sense in my opinion. So, that's our story for today, y'all. It's about Elizabeth Bathory and, you know, the Countess, and how she has this horrible name behind her, but now they're starting to find out some things about her that people really wanted her to just stay silent. They wanted her things, they wanted her money, they wanted her land, and they got it. So, that's our story for today. If you guys like it, please hit that like and subscribe button. And I appreciate you guys being here with me today. I hope y'all are staying nice and warm because I know it's cold outside. But anyways, if nobody's told you guys today, I love you. And I hope you have a glorious week. See you guys soon.